How did the country Israel come to be? And how did the conflict between Israel and Palestine begin?
The time has come to draw the line. For the enemy to understand their time is up, we are announcing an operation called Al-Aqsa Floods.
Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions.
A small country known as Israel, which has a small population, is located in one of the most controversial areas in the world. For thousands of years, there have been fights in this area. This raises many questions, including the primary reason for which they have been fighting for thousands of years, and why people from around the world couldn't come to a solution for this conflict. An even larger question is, what exactly is Israel's strength that enables them to defeat all Arab nations together? We will discuss all of these things in detail. What you are seeing highlighted in yellow is Israel, and the gray-colored area is the West Bank. The Gaza Strip is the country known as Palestine, and the place denoted by a star is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the primary cause of the conflict between Christians, Jews, and Muslims. All these things started way back in 1047. At that time, this was known as the Kingdom of Israel. Jews lived here, and it was ruled by King Solomon. The capital of the Kingdom of Israel was Jerusalem, and in this Jerusalem, King Solomon constructed the first temple of Jews, which was named Temple Mount. Jews used to worship regularly in this temple. This historical legacy became part of the Jewish claim to the land of Israel. After this, in the year 586 BC, the Babylonians came and demolished this first temple. Then came the Persians, who got this temple reconstructed. But after reconstruction, the first temple was named the Second Temple. Then came the Roman Empire, which demolished the Second Temple, leaving only a wall. By this time, the Jews started their migration to Europe because they were being persecuted under this empire, those Jews who still existed, and in one such family, Jesus Christ was born. So, Jesus Christ was actually a Jew. As Jesus Christ grew under the Roman Empire, he started his own teachings, which were different from Jewish ideology, and quickly gained recognition. However, the Jews did not approve, and the issue escalated to the point where the Jews in Jerusalem publicly crucified Jesus, resulting in his death. Due to all this, there was a surge of negative sentiments against Jews, and to this day, Jews are blamed for it. During the Crusades that happened around 1,000 years ago, Christians killed Jews in large numbers. At that time, many rumors circulated against the Jews, such as allegations that they drank the blood of Christian children or used it for religious rituals. By this particular point in time, everything was running fine in the Roman Empire. However, in the year 306, King Valerius passed away, and his son, Constantine the Great, became the Roman king. Constantine started to like Christianity a lot, becoming the first king to adopt Christianity. His conversion to Christianity led to its spread throughout the entire Roman Empire. However, as Jesus was killed by Jews, hatred toward Jews also spread widely in his kingdom. Jews were badly tortured and killed, which resulted in Jews migrating all over the world to save themselves, especially to Europe, the place where Jesus was crucified. Constantine the Great built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This church was approximately 2 kilometers away from the area of the Temple Mount. Jews called it Temple Mount itself, but Muslims referred to it as Haram al-Sharif. In the year 638, after defeating the Roman Empire, the Arab army of Umar took control. When this Jewish area fell into the hands of Arab armies, the area in Jerusalem, where Jews had their second temple, Dome of the Rock, was constructed in the same place. Also, Al-Aqsa Mosque was constructed. This happened because the Muslim prophet was transported from Al-Masjid al-Haram to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, and he offered prayers there. The place where he prayed, Al-Aqsa Mosque, was constructed, and from the same place, he is believed to have stepped into heaven, leading to the construction of Dome of the Rock on the same spot. On the screen, you can see the Dome of the Rock, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Western Wall. This entire area, as shown, is called Temple Mount by Jews, and Muslims refer to it as Haram al-Sharif. Al-Aqsa Mosque does not allow entry to non-Muslims, but Jews are allowed to worship at the Western Wall. 2 kilometers from the area is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, an area of around 37 acres that is very important for Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Now you can understand the importance of Jerusalem, which is significant for the world's 2 largest religions, Judaism and Christianity. For Muslims, after Mecca and Medina, this area became the 3rd holiest site in Islam. This is the reason there are so many issues regarding this area, and all 3 communities want it. Whenever Jews were ruled by one ruler or another, they started migrating all over the world, leaving behind their properties and land, especially to Europe. But Jews never forgot about their land. Even after being settled anywhere in the world, Jews always prayed with their faces turned toward Jerusalem. In the year 1891, the kingdom area of Jews was taken by Arabs. However, Jews who were living all across the world, especially in Europe, always wanted to return to their original land. In the same year, 1891, a Jewish writer named Leon Pinsker wrote a book called Auto-Emancipation, where he argued that in Europe, Jews were treated badly, even with any rules created for Jews there, and Europeans did not consider them equal citizens. Jews needed to write their own fate and create an independent state for Jews. This was the time when the Jews' demand to return to their land had turned into politics. There was an Austro-Hungarian journalist named Theodor Herzl who played a significant role in the rise of Zionism. He started a political movement in his 1896 pamphlet, Zionism. He argued that Jews should have their separate country. Because of these reasons, in 1881, the first large-scale migration of Jews was seen in the Palestine area. The Jews built many permanent settlements in the area and started living there. They chose the Palestine area because it was a very holy area for them, with Jerusalem being the holiest place for the Jews. It's essential to remember that at that time, there was no Israel, Gaza, or the West Bank. The whole area was Palestine, which fell under the Ottoman Empire. Under the Ottoman Empire, Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived together peacefully, more or less, as there were no conflicts. One reason behind this might be that most of the land was empty, with very few settlements and a small population in the area. All of this continued, and around the year 1914, World War began. The British, French, and Arab revolutionaries were fighting against the Ottoman Empire. The British played a clever hand here. They told the Arab revolutionaries that in return for their support in defeating the Ottoman Empire, they would give them the Palestine area. The Arab revolutionaries were fighting to create a unified Arab country, one that would stretch from Syria to Yemen. The British promised the same thing to the Jews, that they would help them create their own Jewish country near Palestine. Why did they do this? To appease American Jews and gain influence in American politics. But in reality, the British made a secret deal with the French. In 1918, World War ended, and Britain emerged as the victor. As soon as the Ottoman Empire fell, the British began to rule in its place. Because Jews openly supported the British in the war, it was widely expected that Britain would reward them. What Britain wrote in the Balfour Declaration was duly followed. Jews who were in Europe were assisted in settling in the Palestine area, where Jews originally resided. Inside Palestine, the Palestinians' population was significantly larger. However, Jews started living in some areas there, even though Jews had lived in Palestinian areas thousands of years ago. The Arab countries around Palestine never liked this migration and strongly opposed it. On one side, Jews from Europe were returning to Palestine with British support, and on the other, Jewish organizations were funding them. They used these funds, which were in cash, to purchase land in Palestine. While the British were telling Arabs that they wanted peace, they were simultaneously sending Jews into Palestine. In 1922, a British white paper came to light, proving that they were deliberately doing this for their own benefit. In reality, it was a divide and rule strategy they were employing. These days, Hitler's rise was gaining momentum, and countries under his influence were persecuting Jews on a large scale. People already blamed Jews for the killing of Jesus Christ and considered Jews to be anti-Christian. Many Jews fled Hitler, controlled Europe to different countries to save themselves, with some finding refuge in America. However, many of these Jews went to Palestine. Initially, Britain allowed them to enter Palestine, but later they began to restrict their entry. As a result, an Israeli nationalist movement started in Palestine. In the year 1939, World War II started, and Arabs supported Hitler in Germany, while Jews put all their efforts into supporting Britain, the US, and the USSR. Jews had to do this, as it was their chance to fight back against Hitler, and they also received training that they would use in future conflicts. World War II ended, and Germany lost. Millions of Jews were killed in this war. After World War II, all countries came together to form the United Nations to prevent wars, suppress possibilities of future wars, and solve problems with countries. Inside the UN, those who had won the World War, such as Britain, the US, and the USSR, had more influence. With the zeal that Jews had shown in supporting Britain, the US, and the USSR, and by putting their lives at risk, the time had come for the Jews to be rewarded. By the end of World War II, it was expected that Jews would regain their country. The Israeli nationalist movement had already started in Palestine, and now Palestine nationalist movement also begun. Palestinians were also demanding their own country. In 1947, the British government presented the Balfour Declaration to the UN through Britain's Foreign Secretary, Ernest said. Now, Palestine is outside the control of Britain. Matter of shifting Jews back to Palestine should be handled by United Nations themselves. The United Nations formed a special committee with members from 11 countries that visited Palestine. This committee reported that Jews made up only 1/3 of the total population of Palestine, while 2/3 of the population were Arabs. Furthermore, only 6% of the total land was owned by Jews. After this report, the UN committee made a historic decision, stating that the only viable solution for the area in Palestine where Palestinians, Jews, and Christians lived, including Jerusalem, which had significant importance for all three religions, was to create a country called Israel for Jews and a country named Palestine for Palestinians. Jerusalem was to remain under the control of the United Nations. Whenever such a decision is proposed in the United Nations, all participating countries vote on it, and this voting helps decide whether the proposal would be approved or not. When voting for this proposal happened, all countries voted in favor of it, while all the Arab countries voted against the proposed partition of Palestine. However, despite the Arab opposition, the partition was approved, and in the year 1947, the UN released a map showing how the partition of Palestine would look and which areas would be designated for whom. Just before the UN made this decision in the year 1946, the white part on this map was inhabited by Jews. However, the partition approved by the UN was quite surprising because Israel even received areas where there was no Jewish population. This is the official map released by the UN as per the partition decision, with the yellow part denoting Jerusalem, which was to be kept under uncontrol. The partition decision made by the United Nations did not sit well with the Arab countries, but Jews were happy to have Israel as their country. After this decision, the British, who were ruling the area, left, and the very next day after their departure, the Arab countries, including Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq, launched a war against Israel. Everyone expected that with so many Arab countries attacking together, they would easily win the war. However, the unexpected happened, and the Arab countries had to back off. In 1949, Israel occupied several areas that were supposed to be part of Palestine, according to the UN partition plan. The Gaza Strip area went to Egypt, and the West Bank area went to Jordan. This meant that the Palestinians no longer had a country, and more than 700,000 Palestinians had to leave their homes and become refugees in Arab countries. This event is known as the 1948 Palestinian Exodus. In the year 1950, Israel passed a law called the Law of Return, which stated that any Jew residing anywhere around the world would be eligible for Israeli citizenship and could come to Israel whenever they wished. This is the original stamp that was used whenever a Jew arrived in Israel. As you can see on the map, this is Israel, and that is all of Egypt. In between, the governments of France and Egypt collectively established a canal named the Suez Canal. Initially, it was fully funded by the French and Egyptian governments. However, due to a financial crisis, Egypt had to sell their shares to a UK-based company, which led to the ownership of the Suez Canal being shared by France and the United Kingdom. At that time, the Suez Canal area became strategically very important for the entire world because it connected Asia with Europe, and everyone, including Israel, had to pass through this canal. However, in 1956, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the ruler of Egypt at that time, made a major decision. He declared, as the Suez Canal has been built on Egyptian land entirely, Egypt will control this area entirely. France and the UK tried hard to convince Nasser that they had heavily invested in this canal, but Nasser didn't listen. He also had a strong inclination towards other Arab nations and had a deep-seated animosity towards Israel. Nasser stated that Israel would not be allowed to pass through the Suez Canal, causing significant issues for Israel as they couldn't send shipments without access to the canal. As a result, Israel, along with the United Kingdom and France, started a war against Egypt and captured the entire area. In 1957, the United Nations made efforts to resolve the conflict and convinced Israel to step back. Israel returned the entire Egyptian area, but only after entering into a written agreement stating that, from that day forward, Israel would never be denied access to the Suez Canal, just like it was available for use by all other countries. However, even after heavy investments, the United Kingdom and France had to leave the area empty-handed. Just a few years later, in 1964, Arab countries held a meeting in Egypt and formed an organization named the Palestine Liberation Organization. The PLO essentially acted as a representation of all Palestinians on both the military and political levels. The main goal of the PLO was to take back Palestine from Israel and return the land to the Palestinians. Initially, their aim was through armed struggle, using weapons to secure their own country. In the beginning, they also wanted Israel to cease to exist. Because of this, the USA and Israel declared it a terrorist organization, but in 1974, the PLO was officially recognized by the United Nations General Assembly. In 1967, the Second Arab-Israeli War took place. This war lasted for 6 days, and Israel emerged as the victor. In just 6 days, Israel recaptured the area of Egypt's land that it had previously captured. Along with that, the Gaza Strip and West Bank were also captured. Later, the United Nations intervened again, and Egypt's area was returned to them, but other parts remained under the control of Israel. In 1969, a leader named Yasser Arafat becomes the chairman of PLO. After Yasser becoming PLO chairman and the war starts face-to-face between PLO and Israel, most of the PLO fighters used to live in Lebanon. Therefore, Israel, without thinking much, attacked on Lebanon. More than 18,000 people lost their lives. In 1979, the peace talks between Egypt and Israel is successful, and Egypt becomes the first Arab country to recognize Israel as a country that exists there. After the peace talks, the entire Egyptian peninsula area captured by Israel is returned to Egypt by Israel. The Egyptian and Israeli prime ministers both are awarded Nobel Peace Prize for the successful peace treaty. But unfortunately, after 2 years, the Egyptian prime minister gets assassinated by the right-wing extremists in Egypt because he reached a compromise. From 1967 to the 1980s, it had been more than 10 years since Israel had occupied the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. During this period, many Israelis start establishing their colonies in the West Bank and living there permanently. Israeli government supported them directly or indirectly, and the prices of the homes were low there. Some people go there for cheap housing, while others for their religious nationalism. Some fanatic Israelis claim that the entire West Bank area is theirs. And so Israeli settlements start cropping up in the West Bank area. The international community deems these settlements to be illegal because these settlements go against the United Nations partition plan. And the Palestinians see them as colonization. Basically, their country is being colonized by the Israelis. In 1992, Israel gets an amazing prime minister. His name was Yitzhak Rabin. He said that PLO is not a terrorist organization. Israel officially recognized PLO, and in return, PLO officially recognized Israel as a country. And here, the 1993 Oslo Accords take place. It was then decided to divide the West Bank area into 3 parts: Area A, B, and C. Area A would be where the Palestinian government would be in control. In Area B, both the governments will exercise control, and Area C will be the areas where the Israeli government will retain control. For this reason, in 1994, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, were awarded Nobel Peace Prize. Now, everyone was under the impression that there would be peace after this. But even signing up this agreement, Israel never followed anything and kept sending Israel citizens to Gaza and Israel. Even skipped honoring the deadline for returning the land to Palestinians. This lead to loss of trust upon Israel among citizens of Palestine, and they believed PLO would make situation worse due to involvement of Israel. This is the point where Hamas comes into existence. Hamas group claims that the PLO is being too secular and compromising a lot with Israel. Hamas start attacking on Israel like guerrilla warfare. Unfortunately, the situation then took a turn for the worse when a Jewish extremist shot the Israeli prime minister in 1995. And because of these fanatics, the situation kept on worsening. Jewish extremists wanted entire Palestine to be Israelis. People on both sides, the Israelis and Palestinians, start hating each other. Some hatred was already there, and after 1995, it keeps on increasing. Around 2002, violent protests were seen on both sides. More than 100 Palestinians died on the other side of the border. There are clashes on the ground, and the people have become so skeptical of each other that Israel starts building walls around its settlements. Security guards are deployed around the permanent houses built by the Israelis in the West Bank, and checkpoints are placed. And it continues to become increasingly difficult for Palestinians to live there. In 2007, this war is known as the Battle of Gaza, and Palestine is divided into 2 parts. In the Gaza Strip, Hamas establishes its control, and the West Bank area is controlled by Fatah and PLO. There is no doubt that Israel has continued to colonize the West Bank area for several decades, causing the clashes to intensify because Israel is occupying the areas in the West Bank, and the fanatics in Israel demand that the entire West Bank area be theirs, that the entire Jerusalem be theirs. And the fanatics in Palestine want to eradicate Israel completely. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs declared that from 2008 to 2022, 45,000 Palestinians died and 415,000 were injured. During the same period, 350 Israelis died and 5,600 were injured. Question still remains the same: who would have Jerusalem and who would get their land back?